Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. I'm Bonnie Squires. I'm the host, the producer. Been doing this for a long time. I get to introduce to you interesting people from the community who are doing important things. And today, we're lucky to have with us Dr. John Crosby, who for 20 years was the superintendent of Radnor Schools. And we're going to talk about his book, which is called Built to Help Each Other, Mentoring in the Life of Richard Caruso, an Uncommon Man. This is a very uncommon book. Not too many people get to do a good deed for a friend who ends up a genius with Alzheimer's. And Dr. Crosby wrote the man's life story for him when he was unable to finish the book. Anyway, Dr. Crosby, welcome to Bonnie's Beat.
Well, it's good to be here, Bonnie.
And thank you for the beautiful dedication that you wrote for me personally in your fabulous book. And you wanted to tell us a little bit about your background growing up in Texas.
Not only Texas, but West Texas, which is, I guess, the Dust Bowl capital of the world. I grew up in the 30s and 40s, and one day on a Black Saturday, actually, no, we call it the Black Sunday, more dust blew out of the Dust Bowl that would fill the Panama Canal twice in one day. So I grew up in West Texas in the Dust Bowl. I had to milk 3 goats every day for 10 years until I graduated from high school because I was allergic to cow's milk. And if there had a dust storm, I had to have a rope that went all the way to the barn so I could not only find the barn, but also not be blown away. And so that is where I grew up, hoeing cotton and chopping, we call it chopping cotton, sometimes pulling cotton. I drove a tractor when I was 10 years old, and the farm was about 1 mile long and a half mile wide. It was very flat, so when we were hoeing cotton, we only had one clock in the house. It was in the kitchen. So we never knew what time it was when we were hoeing cotton. So my mother would climb up 20 feet up on the windmill, and she would shine the light on our faces so we would know to come in for lunch. And we were always looking up at the sun. We kind of knew where it was, but we were always looking for the flash. We were big on flashes in those days. So that's where I grew up, and that's why I left West Texas and came by way of Abilene Christian College to do my degree. I knew that in order to get out of the cotton patch, I had to get an education. And so education was my salvation. And I went to Abilene Christian, then did a master's at Vanderbilt, Peabody it was called then, and then my doctorate at Columbia University Teachers College. And that's the way I ended up in Pennsylvania, first as the superintendent of schools in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And then I came to Radnor, and those years were the best years of my life.
You had a good football team, although I think Lower Merion beat you a few times, right? That was a big rivalry, the Lower Merion Radnor game, I remember. That was
it was. Deal. It still is. It's the biggest rivalry there is. 125 years.
Wow. Anyway, so
I remember all of the wonderful pep rallies we had during those days.
The interesting thing about there's so many interesting things about this wonderful book that you wrote about the life of Richard Caruso. The funny thing is, when Richard Caruso was a parent of some of your students, he was a colossal pain in the you-know-what. And then 10 years later, he calls you out of the blue and invites you to have coffee with him. And you couldn't understand why, because you never got along with him. But he saw you as someone who was a mentor. And that was a word that in the 1980s was not a very popular word. Nobody knew what that was.
Didn't even hear the word.
Yeah. And Caruso had started writing his life story, and he got 70 pages into it. And this was a guy who, how did he make his millions?
Well, the first million that he made was lease financing. He had a lease financing company in the Radnor Corporate Center with Frank Slattery, and the business was to lease airplanes and trains and boats, ships. Sometimes he would buy IBM equipment and lease it to startups. And so he made millions of dollars working for all of these startup companies, including CNN and FedEx and a lot of these very large companies. He was on the phone sometimes leasing airplanes for FedEx. So he helped a lot of these very big companies get started.
He was a visionary. Oh, my goodness. Well, I love it when you said the first million. How many millions followed?
Many millions, 20 times over.
Ooh.
I have no idea. He may be a billionaire. I don't know. But when I met him, I didn't know he had anything. I didn't know he had the kind of wealth that he had. But when he asked me to go to lunch with him, we met at what you know now as the Belrose, I call it 333, over by the Radnor train station.
Yeah.
We met there. And when he called me, he said, "Would you please have lunch with me?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Caruso," I said, "you have been a pain in my you-know-what for 10 years. You've always been very nice to me, but you never got your way because you always wanted something for your two boys that I couldn't give you. Like all Radnor parents, they want the best for their children, and they will do anything to make sure they get the best." And that's true in Lower Merion, too. Anyway, he had asked me to pick up his two boys on his front doorstep one time. He said, I think that the place you're having them picked up on Conestoga Road by the Ithan Market is hazardous, so I want you to pick them up at my doorstep. I said, "Well, it's only 200 yards down to Conestoga Road." He said, "I know, but I think it's hazardous, and you can't have a hazardous slop." I said, "You're right. There is a school code that says there can be no hazardous routes, but there's no rules on what is hazardous." So I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll meet you tomorrow morning at down where we pick them up by your mailbox, and we'll decide if it's hazardous or not." And so the next morning, I was down at his house with Jack Lord, who was a member of the board. He was in charge of the transportation committee, and Jake McCarty. And we looked, and he thought that the bus would be coming over the hill, and maybe if the bus stopped, another car would run into the back of it and cause them to be injured. So we looked, and he looked at me, and he said, "Dr. Crosby, I think that's okay. I think it's okay. We'll let it go." So he didn't get his way. He even had offered to have the bus come up to his cul-de-sac. And I said, "Mr. Caruso, we don't do cul-de-sacs. It's very dangerous." He said, "Well, my cul-de-sac is big enough for a fire truck to run around in, so there's no danger." I said, "Well, we're still not going to have an exception. There will be no exceptions." Well, when I was writing the book for him, I found out a secret. Richard never gave up on an idea. He was like you, never give up. And I found out from his son, Peter, that a week after I had turned him down, he had called the transportation department and changed the bus stop to the road that's behind his house, Newtown Road. So he still, and I didn't know this until 40 years later, that he had actually changed the bus stop. The next time he called me and he said, there are 23 kids in my son's third grade class, and there should be, their average class size at Ithan Elementary School is only 19. And I want you to put another teacher in the third grade class so his class size will go down to 17. And I said, well, Mr. Caruso, I gave him all the reasons why that could not happen. He said, well, it's hard to make a decision over the telephone. Would you mind meeting me at the Ithan school? And you know me, I'm always accessible and available to talk with people. So I said, sure. So we set up the next Wednesday night and went over about 5 o'clock, and he had invited all the third grade parents to the room. There were like 40 people in the room, and here I was by myself, and he wanted me to add a teacher. And we had just closed 2 elementary schools, and there were still rooms available in the Ithan school, and we were meeting in one of the empty rooms. And after an hour of talking and saying, I can't do this, he pulled out his ace of spades and he said, let me tell you what I'm going to do in front of all the parents. He said, I am going to give you what is equivalent today of about $60,000 out of my own pocket. I am going to pay for this new teacher and all the benefits and all the staff development you want to give her. And you can have that teacher in this classroom, and she can bring the class size down to 17. So, Bonnie, what would you do? You're the superintendent of schools in Radnor, and you have to decide in front of 40 parents.
I bet you said yes right away.
I had to say no.
Oh, you're kidding.
In Radnor and Lower Merion, if you let the parents run the school district, you don't even need a superintendent. So I said no. Coca-Cola had even offered me $300,000 if I would put a scoreboard on the football field with the sign Coca-Cola about 6 feet high. And the answer is no. And so the answer to Mr. Caruso was no. But 10 years later, he calls me and he says, Dr. Crosby, would you be willing to have lunch with me? It was actually lunch. And I said, sure. You look, Mr. Caruso, I said, you've been a pain in my side for 10 years. I said, why do you want to have lunch with me? And he says, well, Dr. Crosby said, you've always been nice to me. You've always been accessible. You've listened to me. You haven't told me that I was crazy. You have just been a very nice person. I said, well, Mr. Caruso, you've been nice to me too. You just have never gotten your way. So I said, okay, I'll have lunch with you if you want to talk. And as we met, he said, there were 4 people in his early life that had made a difference. He was going to be a car mechanic. He had graduated from Atlantic City High School, and he loved to work on old cars, and he was going to be a car mechanic. But the coach at the high school, when Richie was walking down the hall one day, he said, hey, Richie, would you like to go to college? And Richie said, hey, Coach, I can't go to college. He said, my dad is from Sicily. My mom is from Italy, Naples. He doesn't speak English, but he works as a waiter in the Claridge Hotel. She's a home mother. So I can't go to college. He said, well, Richie, you're my best football player, and there's a person here that would like to talk to my best players. And you're the best player. So they talked, and Jim Garrett, who we know now, when I wrote the book, I found that Jim Garrett is the father of Jason Garrett, he was the head football coach for the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
And he was there for 10 years, and now He then went to the Giants. He was let go, as many football player coaches are. But he said it was, so Jim Garrett, the father of Jason Garrett, gave him a full scholarship to Susquehanna University. And it was that man who became a mentor to him, along with his assistant football coach. The story there is that when this man drove up for the first practice, he had a suit on, three-piece suit. He drove up with a Cadillac. He had graduated from Susquehanna, and Richard thought he was a professor, but he turned out to be a graduate of Susquehanna. He had majored in accounting, so he was the assistant football coach. And Richard saw, well, if this man has a three-piece suit on and he drives in a Cadillac, he said, I'm gonna major in accounting. So he majored in accounting. He became another mentor to him. So you have the high school football coach, Jim Garrett, assistant.
Was that Petrillo?
And that was, yes, it was. He was. He kept in touch with them for the rest of their lives. But there was another man in Atlantic City who was a very wealthy man that became his mentor. And he said, this is the key. He said, these four men, if it hadn't been for them, when I was 3 years old, he said, I was named the Entrepreneur of the Year of the United States of America. And the next year, I came in second to be the Entrepreneur of the World. And he said, if it hadn't been for those four people, I would have been a car mechanic. So he said, I want you, here's what he said he wants you to do. He said, I want you to do for others what these four men did for me. And I said, well, Mr. Caruso, I said, what does that mean? He said, I have no idea. He said, but I decided that you can do it. And he said, I'm going to call this the Uncommon Man Foundation. I said, well, Mr. Caruso, we cannot call it that. We have to change one word. The Uncommon Individual Foundation, because we're going to be working with both men and women, girls and boys, and we're going to do for others regardless of their gender. And so that is what we'll call this foundation. It will be called the Uncommon Individual Foundation. And we started off with, he said, I'm going to give you $1 million to do this. I said, $1 million? He said, that's the beginning. You may need more as you go along. And so we started off that first year with a $100,000 budget. And today, after 36 years, our budget is $2.1 million a year.
Wow.
We have 18 employees. We do 5 major mentoring programs for people all over, not only this area, but the world, because some of our mentoring programs are by computer. And so they can be doing it in China or anywhere in the world. But we have moved now from $100,000 to $2 million, and we have 18 employees, and we just bought a four-story building in Devon. We use the first floor, and the other 3 floors are leased, and we just have a wonderful program going, and that's what Richard did. And when he started writing his book, he came to me and he said, John, are you having trouble with your brain? And I said, Mr. Caruso, I don't think so. He said, well, my brain is not working properly, and I'm having trouble writing the book that I'm trying to write. And so the book kind of sat on the shelf for several years. That was in 2013. And so in 2017, I said, this is a book that needs to be written. It's got to be written. And if it's anybody's going to write it, it's got to be me. So I wrote the book after 2 years. It was published in 2019, and it has been doing well on Amazon. And it's not only for the family, but it's for anybody who is interested in mentoring, because it will show you how mentoring works in a natural way. See, mentoring always works in a natural way. And what I started trying to do was try to have it happen by design. I'm trying to have mentoring happen by design, what has always happened by accident. And so that's what we've been doing for 36 years. I know I've talked a lot. See, great mentors do not talk, they listen. They listen to what the person they're trying to mentor, and they find out what their strengths are. And they say, you've got to soar with your strengths and manage your weaknesses. That's our golden rule. And so I'm now talking a lot, and I'd like to let you slip in here. Okay.
Well, you had his 70 pages, but the book.
He wrote 70 pages, and so I was having to change his book from first person to third person. But I wanted to use all of his quotes, all of the work that he did on that 70 pages within the book. So as a writer and as a columnist, you know that takes a lot of work to be able to use not only what he wrote, but if you read the book, you'll see that I do quote Richard. Almost everything that he wrote is being quoted in the book.
Also, you have a list of like 100 people that knew him, that worked with him, that lived with him, that were related to him, and you collected stories from all of them so that you could fill in the blanks, because he ended up with this brilliant multimillionaire or billionaire, ended up with Alzheimer's, so that he didn't know you, he didn't know who he was. What a terrible tragedy. But,
very sad story.
But you picked up all the pieces from all the people that had ever intersected with Caruso. And I love the fact that in 2018, his alma mater, Susquehanna University, dedicated the Richard E. and Sally F. Caruso Mentoring and Innovation Center at their library. They left an endowment to their, to his alma mater. And I think that's just remarkable. Must have been a lot of money in the endowment for them to create a whole center with his name on it. And the photos, you collected so many photos. Where did you find all the pictures of Caruso in different stages of his life?
Well, my wife is the one that did all of it. We went to Sally's Caruso, and we hunted all over the place in attics and, albums and everything we could find. And we were able to find about 50 pictures. And when Richard was writing his book, all of the things that he had written was about his business successes. All of the things that he had done in the book, I think I even mentioned the fact that he had helped start FedEx, CNN, Verizon, Pico, Provco, and LFC. All of these startups he has actually helped start, and he wanted to write about all of those successes, but he hadn't written a single thing about his family. He didn't mention his wife at all, and I felt that the book had to be about his whole family. It had to be about him, and not only just his successes, but also a book that could be carried on from generation to generation of the Caruso family because of this unusual, uncommon individual that had done what he had been able to accomplish. He believed that he could, he would take no for an answer. He would not take no for an answer. And the last part of the book, what happened is that he bought the franchise, the license for a product that nobody thought could work, but he, believing that he could do the impossible, bought the license, and it was for being able to save burn victims, thousands and millions of burn victims. They now have a skin that can actually be regenerated into real skin. and his new company called Life Sciences. His new company, Integra Life Sciences, is now a company in Princeton, New Jersey, that is bringing in over $2 billion a year in order to use his product and other products that he has added to that particular business. Now, he doesn't know that he has a penny. He is being well cared for at Brightview Assisted Living. He's got all of the money that he needs, but he doesn't know he has a penny. He doesn't know that I exist. He doesn't know that I wrote his book, but I did it for him because he was good to me, even though he never got his way. But he started me out with $1 million, and he said, "You can do it." He believed in me, and that's what great mentors do. They believe in you. It is my definition of mentoring. If you look and see, when I started the mentoring organization, there was no books on mentoring. There was not anything about mentoring because you didn't see the word in the mid-1980s. So I decided that I saw some people that wrote 2 or 3 pages of what mentoring was, but they didn't, you don't remember that. A good mission statement is something that you can remember. So here's my definition of mentoring. I have 2 of them. Mentoring is a brain to pick, a shoulder to cry on, and a kick in the pants.
Love it.
If you have one person that can do that, all 3 of them, a brain to pick, a shoulder to cry on, and a kick in the pants, and you know what people like the most? They like the shoulder to cry on. They love to have people listen to them. See, listening is the supreme act of caring. Listening, you can't do anything more than listen to people, whether it's a child or whether it's an adult. But now I was doing a mentoring program for some women, and they didn't like my kick in the pants idea. They said, that's not PC. So I came up with another definition of mentoring, and it's this. Mentoring is a brain to pick, an ear to listen, and a push in the right direction. And if you have one person that can do that, they will be the best mentor in the world. But if they can't do the kick in the pants, you need more than one. You need as many mentors, and so you turn everybody you can into a mentor. See, mentoring is multiple, and it depends on the protege, not the mentor. Because it's like Richard Caruso. Who made Richard successful? It was those men, but also it was Richard. If it hadn't been for the protege, he would not have been successful. So that's the answer to great mentoring. Mentoring is the protege-driven. It's multiple. You have as many people as you can. And if you want to work with the foundation, we'll teach you some of the do's and don'ts of great mentoring, because there are some things you can do that will destroy mentoring relationships. And you need to know what those are. And so you'll find a lot of this information in my book. It's not just about his life, but it's about our philosophy of mentoring and how it really works, not only in real life, but in when we try to teach it. So that's our book. And thank you so much, Bonnie, for letting me come together and talk to you a little bit about this.
Let's tell people they can reach you through uif.org, right?
Uncommon Individual. uif.org will get us. And okay. My email address is just simply jcrosby@uif.org. And I'm always available, just as I was with Richard Caruso when he was trying to get favors for his 2 sons.
Dr. John Crosby, thank you so much for putting us in the right direction towards mentoring. And this has been a wealth of information, and we'll see everybody next time on Bonnie's Beat. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie.